Cardiovascular Institute of the South is celebrating 40 years of delivering healthcare to our patients and communities. Founded by Dr. Craig Walker in 1983 and guided by a mission to provide the highest quality cardiovascular care available, CIS has pioneered hundreds of firsts to improve outcomes for cardiovascular diseases. Through new technology, virtual care, outpatient procedures, and national growth, CIS is improving lives and leading the way for advanced care and innovation.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. We'll spend the next couple of segments talking about Lafourche Parish, and nobody better to talk about Lafourche Parish than the parish president, Mr. Archie Chaisson. Archie, thanks so much for joining us, man. At least we're not talking about a hurricane coming in, but we are talking about, actually I had to look it up. These last two hurricanes, we kind of forgot the name of Francine. I had to look up Francine's name, right? It's a good thing for us that we're not dealing with, unfortunately, and I'm not saying anything about North Carolina or Florida. We know what they're going through. But yeah, we've kind of been kicked off the map here a little bit, and you guys are still picking up stuff from Hurricane Francine.
Yeah, Harry, thanks for having us on again. And first of all, our prayers are with not only the people affected from Hurricane Helene, but the folks in Tampa Bay and across Florida that are fixing to get a pretty good butt kicking by Milton. It's not going to be fun for them over the next couple of days and hours and weeks and months after this thing rolls in. But we're going to continue to pray for them. I know that Fire District 3 down in South Lafourche, as well as some of our other fire departments, have sent people over there in advance of that. And I have a feeling we're going to get some more calls and some requests for that after, trying to plan, a hurricane drive for those folks and how do we help them with sending blankets and cleaning supplies and stuff like that in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be working on that. But a little bit of work from Francine still going on. Our debris trucks are still running around. The very, very weird storm kind of came in from a west to east, which is not typically what we see. They either come straight up at us or come from east to west. So it was a little bit different of a setup. Overall, I think the parish did really, really well. Not a whole lot of damage to report. About $100,000 or 100,000 cubic yards of debris on the ground, which is minuscule compared to what we saw for Hurricane Ida, of course. But so those trucks will be over the next couple of weeks trying to pick that stuff up and get out of here, because those guys want to go chase the big money in these other hurricane ravaged counties across the country. Look, no fault to them. They've done really good work in picking it up, and so does the state picking up the DOTD routes. So, our big focus kind of post-Francine was meet with some of the neighborhoods. We're going to have about 60 or so homes that took on some water because of the hurricane, mostly in that North Lafourche, Thibodeau area. Some older development, older subdivisions that, in those days we were designing for the 5 and 10-year storm events. Now we're designing at least for a 25-year event, but we're seeing those 50, 100, 200-year storm events. In this particular case, it was somewhere between a 3 and a 500-year event when Thibodeau saw about 8 inches of rain in 2 hours. I mean, just tremendous amount of water fell, and there's no system in the world can handle that. So you couple, an older subdivision that wasn't designed to handle that sort of water with a ton of water, even with the improvements we've made in pump stations and drainage works across the parish. It was just a tough day for those 60 or so homes that took on water. So, we're talking to those residents, trying to figure some things out, working with Representative Fontenot and Senator Fazy and Senator Allen to look at maybe some capital outlay dollars, some statewide flood control grant opportunities that might help us, in the long run, knowing that some of these houses are going to be repetitive loss structures. So a little bit of a tough time for those guys, but overall, look, it could have been way worse. But the levee systems held, the pump stations worked for the most part. So it was a really good kind of a test run for us. I hate to use that terminology, but it would be good. If we were going to have a hurricane, this was probably the one to get, and not what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, like I said, don't want to minimize what those 60 homes have gone through and what they're going to go through, as it goes. But it does show that our infrastructure is a little more hardened, right? Is that we're kind of ready. I know Terrebonne Parish did well. Lafourche Parish seemed like they did good. Morgan St. Mary hadn't been through, Ida, which probably hardened our roofs and all those kind of things. So it was good to see that the infrastructure did hold up for the most part.
Yeah, and I think that's why we didn't see a whole lot of debris on the ground. I think from Highway 90 South, we had only about 3,000 or 5,000 cubic yards of debris on the ground. That's unheard of after a hurricane, right? And I think that's because a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation was cleared out for Hurricane Ida and just hadn't rebounded. And again, we didn't really have the wind damage that we saw. A couple of structures here or there, but nothing that was like what we've seen in the past. So, I think the reason why we saw that larger amount of debris up toward Thibodeau is that a lot of those trees were not impacted during Hurricane Ida. It hit Highway 90 and went right and went to the river parishes and really for the most part spared North Lafourche. So we saw a lot more debris this storm, as a Category 1, Category 2 storm than we would have seen if Ida would have
Sure.
gone straight up the parish, which we're glad it didn't, by the way. But it worked out for us.
Yeah, it sure did. We had Gary Graves, Representative Gary Graves, and he had talked about it was 31.7 million for the area that FEMA was paying off, which is 3 years later. It's like, well, we appreciate having the funds, right? But it is 3 years later. I did see that the Terrebonne, Lafourche Parish School Board got some money and Port Commission got some money. It's welcome, I'm sure, on your behalf, but it's 3 years later. It's kind of tough for creditors, like, hey, we need to get our money here.
Yeah, and for us, we went out in the days and months after I had borrowed $120 million, right? So that's what we've used to cash flow the architects, the engineers, a lot of this construction until some of this stuff has come out. So some of this stuff has come on the front end in a couple of cases. Our Tourist Commission office, part of the announcement from Congressman Graves was some money going to the Willamette Library for us, which is going to be upfront dollars. It's going to be sitting there waiting for us, and we could draw down on that versus using the bond money. But, Congressman Graves has also been really effective for us. One of the fights we had with FEMA was, you've taken so long to do this, right? So we found a provision in the law that actually talks about if you borrow money, then FEMA can be a reimbursement for the interest on those bonds that you're paying. So we've actually worked with him and his staff, and we got our first kind of interest payment of about $1.2 million a few months ago. And hopefully going to keep that on track. But yeah, it is very frustrating to see, as slow as these things move, that we have to go out and borrow this money. And, what it really does for us, Harry, is that if we want to do anything else in Lafourche, right, a big road project, a big recreation project, our bonding capacity is now shot because we have to wait so long to get reimbursed from the federal government that we got to go out and borrow all this money. So it does take its toll on more than one level. It affects projects down the road. But luckily, due to his hard work, and we're going to miss him, as he kind of transitions out of office in the next couple of months. But he's been a huge fighter for us, and really been a force behind getting those reimbursements to us. Yeah,
he's done a good job. We hate to lose him for the next couple of years. Anyway, hey, we need to take a break. We'll be right back with more Archie Chaisson right here on Bayou Time.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. We're speaking with Archie Chaisson about all things Lafourche. He is the Lafourche Parish president. Archie, we've been talking, seems like a few years, about the new energy source that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, whether it be blue or green, but particularly the wind energy and those wind fields are out there and how you guys can kind of prepare and use Lafourche to kind of supply those places. But where are we at with the wind energy right now?
Yeah, so it started a couple of years ago, Harry, when Governor Edwards, asked the federal government to put together kind of a Gulf Wind task force. We knew it was happening on the East Coast. We know they've been doing it in Europe for 15 or so years, and we knew it was eventually going to get to us. So, very luckily, we had a huge group from Louisiana that was appointed to that task force. Representative Joe Ogeron, Chet Chaisson from the Greater Lafourche Port Commission, and myself, kind of the Lafourchians of the group. And it's kicked off. They had the first lease sale a few months ago. There was a company called REW. That got that first wind block lease, it kind of more toward the Lake Charles area, but right. In the Gulf. So they're working through some permitting and some supply chain and all those issues. But CPEX, the Center for Planning and Excellence, has been a group that's kind of been plugged into this, trying to build a roadmap for what Louisiana offshore wind is going to look like. And how do we build it out? And for us, Harry, it gets you talk about wind and people get a little iffy, right? They kind of laugh at you and chuckle, and people tied to the Green New Deal, and we're in a very red state, so it doesn't really sell sometimes. But for us, and we talked a lot about this on this trip. So CSPEX hosted this kind of offshore official delegation tour to Germany to try to figure out how they've done it, right? Not only through political cycles, but through supply chain. How has it worked through weather events? How has it worked through actually supplying energy to the grid? and making their lives a little bit easier. And for the European guys right now, there's a big push because they're trying to break away from Russian gas, right? With everything going on in Ukraine and the problems in Europe right now. So for us, it's a little bit different, right? We're always going to be oil and gas related. We're always going to be an oil and gas community. But for us, it's more about putting people back to work, right? We can put some of these lift boats back to work. We can put some of these machinists back to work. We can put some of these people on these platforms that are electricians working on these turbines, getting it up and running. And look, if it generates some electricity and we get to, make a little bit of money off of it for our energy partners, if we get to drive down the cost, hopefully as things progress, then that's what this is all about. It's not about trying to transition away from oil and gas. And as I've noted over and over and over again, when we talk about this, you can't lubricate these things with unicorn oil. It's got to be, or sunflower seed oil. It's got to be from a petroleum product, right? The boats that are putting these things up run with diesel engines. It's right. you can't use an EV lift boat to go put these things up. So we talked a lot about with the German Parliament people, with the supply chain folks, about what does the workforce look like? How do we tie in things like Fletcher and Nichols and some of our blue collar trades into this? What does it mean for the shipyards and building the jackets that these things are going to stand on? One of the guys who was on the trip was a member and one of the owners of Gulf to Wind Technology, who's currently at the old Avondale site that we're trying to lure down to Lafourche to come build their permanent manufacturing facility. But they need about 200 or 300 people to build these big wind blades. These things are 100 meters long. A lot of carbon fiber, a lot of techniques that go into these things, and they need a huge workforce just to build the blades. That's not talking about building the turbines. That's not talking about building the jackets that the poles sit on. That's not talking who's running the wiring, who's actually wiring these things up, who's building the grid onshore to accept the power, who's building the transmission lines to transmit the power once it's onshore. So, look, it could be a huge economic game changer for us, and we've kind of positioned ourselves in Lafourche as kind of that gateway to Gulf wind, right? We have Port Fourchon, we have the lift boats, we have the offshore vessels. Edison Schwess Offshore just christened about a month or two ago their first offshore wind vessel. It's, rigged up exclusively to do wind farm work. So, those things, who's going to build these vessels? We can build them here in Lafourche and Terrebonne, right? We know what we're doing when it comes to those construction techniques. So I think it's a very advantageous piece for us. It was very interesting to see how they have done it, how they've dealt with the weather. And what's really neat is a lot of people talk about hurricanes with these things, Harry, and how do they withstand a hurricane? And the one thing I didn't know until we got into this was that it's not really the pole that the turbine sits on that's the problem from a structure standpoint. It's the blades. Right. That's where things break and crack and cause the issues. But each one of these blades, there's 3 blades on a turbine, and each one of these blades is set on its own gear head. So when the winds start to pick up, these blades actually turn themselves into the wind, and actually the wind is shooting straight through it instead of making it spin. So when they're testing blade forces, and again, we went to one of the testing labs and watched it happen, the forces they're putting on these blades are these up and down forces as they bounce, not so much them spinning very fast. That doesn't happen very often due to the mechanics of it. So it was interesting to see that engineering technology and everything from the clothing you wear when you go offshore to the vessels to the little minute pieces of, Castrol, thinking about oil changes on these things and how often that has to happen. So I think it was a really good trip. It was, we had 4 state senators on the trip, the Southeastern Wind Coalition, the Power Coalition, GNO Inc., the parishes were represented there as well, trying to think through, those workforce and economic development issues with LED. The Public Service Commission came as well. So overall, it was a really good cultural trip to figure out, how is this going to work here in Louisiana, and what does it mean long-term for us on the local level, not only from a revenue standpoint, but how do we put our people back to work? Yeah,
no, absolutely. Just because you're pro-energy doesn't mean you're anti-climate, right? Any kind of way, green energy is great too, the way you can do that, especially if you can get people to work and work on those things. It's real important. And I do like tying in the community colleges and universities to do that as well. Hell, Texas has more wind power than anybody going into their grid now, so they could be a good partner with that. The only other thing, the LNG, you're talking about Europe's trying to get off, they could use some Louisiana LNG, right, instead of Russia.
We can send them all they need.
That might have been, I don't know if we can have a Nord Stream that goes all the way from here to there, but yeah, we could help those guys out for sure. Well, I'm sure it was a great trip, and look, that's the way you learn and you implement those kind of things. So we sure appreciate the update, Archie, and hopefully things are good in Lafourche for the rest of this hurricane season, right?
We'll keep it going that way, Harry. Thanks for having us.
Okay, man, appreciate it. We'll be right back with more Bayou Time right after this.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights.